Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast, the podcast dedicated to healthcare security, safety, and emergency management. If you are involved with a healthcare security program or desire to be, this podcast is for you. Join the conversation as we discuss the issues that matter to healthcare security professionals while leveraging the expertise of healthcare security thought leaders and experts in personal development. And now, here's your host, Brian Hamilton.
Welcome to the Healthcare Security Cast. I'm Brian Hamilton. Today is Wednesday, January the 8th, 2020. And just a quick update, the Healthcare Security Cast is approaching 300 downloads, and so far to date we've been downloaded in 7 countries. Thank you for the support. We'll continue to bring value, and I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far, and let's keep those results strong. Engage with us on social media. We have a Facebook page. We have a LinkedIn group. The links are in the description. When you're on social media engaging as a member of the community, be sure to use the hashtag HSCCommunity. That will make it easier for me to engage with you, and thank you for your support. Also, feel free to connect with me on social media. My name is Brian, B-R-I-N-E, Hamilton. I'd love to hear from you. For today's episode, our guest is Nelson Price. He's the Director of Safety, Security, and Emergency Preparedness at Providence St Health in Alaska. Our conversation focuses on his K-9 program, and we will also discuss his transition from law enforcement as well as IAHSS. I hope you enjoy.
Nelson, thank you for joining us. Now, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who is Nelson Price?
So, my name is Nelson Price. I'm a family man. I am a certified healthcare protection administrator with IAHSS. I am retired law enforcement and been with Providence Healthcare now for going on 5 years as the Director of Safety, Security, and Emergency Management.
All right, excellent. And if we could just circle back to that, it seems when I was looking at your experience, you have a pretty cool background. Now, what led you to, with your background, what led you to get into healthcare security?
Well, it's kind of a funny story, Brian. I was actually retired and trying the stay-at-home dad situation for about 6 months, and I was on my way to, something with my family, and I ran into somebody at a grocery store. And they're like, hey, I know you've been retired or just recently retired, and there's this position open that I think you might be a good fit for if you're interested at all. And I was working on my master's degree at the time and really wasn't looking, but it piqued my interest. And then, just a few weeks later, within that week, I turned my application in, set up an interview, and within a few weeks, I was hired for the position. So I've been here ever since. It wasn't on purpose, but I find it to be more of a calling. I kind of like to look at it that way.
I definitely have to agree with you. I feel like a lot of us have accidentally gotten into this industry, but once we get into it, there's no turning back really. You either love it or you don't.
Oh, I absolutely love it, and I right now I can't see myself doing anything different.
Awesome. Now, can you tell us a little bit about your program as well?
So we are currently a standalone in-house proprietary program. I have 40 officers within our Providence region here locally in Anchorage, Alaska. And then we have an additional 6 in Kodiak. So I oversee the Alaska region, which includes Seward, Alaska, Valdez, Alaska, Kodiak, Alaska, and all the entities we have spread out through Anchorage and Matsu in Alaska. So I answer to our COO here, and then we have a system director of security, and work in conjunction with them routinely and regularly in creating best practice for our system in healthcare and safety and security.
The main thing that we wanted to really touch on was your K-9 program. So,
yes.
How did you what was the process like? What was the foundation of it? What was the start? What made you want to pursue bringing K-9s into part of your team?
Well, even as being prior law enforcement and coming back and forth to this very hospital many times to drop off patients and family members and those kind of things, I had no idea that workplace violence was such an issue within healthcare because, it wasn't my realm and I had not been around it. But I learned that it was quite a significant issue and still is throughout the nation. So as that grew and we looked at doing different things and adding different tools for the officers and trying to find that best practice, we find that there really isn't or wasn't a best practice. And so in looking at the different tools we can provide without, without creating like a prison-type atmosphere, still trying to make it free and open because we want to welcome patients and visitors and guests in. We came across the canine program through the IAHSS, International Association of Healthcare Security and Safety, that was mentioned there as, potential, and it wasn't really big at the time. So I did a bunch of research on that, and I presented it to our administration here, and it was kind of what I expected. It was kind of like, well, it's nobody else has done it. We're not really sure about it. And then I learned later that there was a large healthcare system in the Southwest United States, in Banner Health, and they had a large canine program. And our CEO and their CEO happened to be at the same conference and spoke about it. And when he came back from that, for whatever reason, and I greatly appreciate that, he gave me the green light and said, go forth and see what we can do. So I did some extensive research, and again, going across the nation, there wasn't a great deal of it. I think 14% of healthcare across the U.S. and even into Canada had not had canines in their program as of yet. So there wasn't a great deal of information out there. I contacted Banner Health, got some great information from them, and then I went to some canine seminars. And from my experience in law enforcement, I just happened to know a bunch of the canine handlers that were local and also some that were known throughout law enforcement. Contacted them, get some ideas from them, had long conversations about it. And then through that and the tools, got some pricing through various organizations and kennels that were, notorious or not notorious, not a great choice of words, but popular amongst law enforcement, and reached out to a bunch of them to see if they had any experience or information they could share. Again, I got kind of the same thing. There wasn't a whole lot of healthcare experience, but they said that they could work with us as far as finding the right dogs for what we're doing. And what we look for primarily are de-escalation dogs. We don't want Cujo. We want a dog that can be social and also at the same time, do its job as far as, so we have dual purpose dogs now. We have one bond dog, one drug dog, and we're about working on right now 2 additional narcotics dogs. But so we're looking at social dogs that we can take out, but that can also quickly de-escalate a situation. And I went through, because we have a psych emergency room as well as our emergency room, which are our primary areas for security that had a large security presence and often were associated with, high-risk situations. I went to them, got their opinions and thoughts, and I was concerned that, maybe the dogs would further escalate some clients or patients, and they were adamantly opposite. They were absolutely bring them in, and they thought that there may be a small percentage that would be escalated, but the majority would enjoy it. So again, did some more research and found that did a cost analysis, presented that to our administration, and found that it was overall over a length of period of time still less than an FTE as far as cost wise.
Wow.
And then we looked at things like kenneling locally or kenneling with the handlers. Contacted risk because, associated with canines and canine bites or potential for a canine bite there's large risk associated with that. And again, thinking, I don't know what kind of pushback I'm going to get here. They came in with open arms and were like, yes, let's do it. So I think a big part of our success here has been our administration and support from the top down. And I find we have many dog lovers within our system. And because our de-escalation program, and that's, again, primarily what they're for, is de-escalation of escalated subjects, patients, visitors, those kind of things. Just the presence of the dogs alone, without having to go through any sort of obedience work with them or the show of the dogs, just the presence alone has made a significant impact to our workplace violence.
And yeah, it sounds like once your CEO was actually on board that you had a great deal of buy-in across the organization. Now, despite that, were there any challenges with implementing the program?
With any new program, there's going to be challenges, and there were some significant ones with this. And we did have a lot of buy-in from our leadership, but it was a new thing. It was a new tool, and there was a lot of uncertainty about it. So it took a lot of research and work to convince them that yes, this is the tool that we need. And I think now that they've seen it in action for a couple of years, they're adequately happy and to the point of growing the program and expanding it. So it's made significant impacts in our workplace violence and reduction of that. And some of the there's risk and liability that come with the canine program. There's always the potential or possibility of someone being bit. We try to just mitigate all those things from occurring as best we can, and that's the last thing we want to do. They are a great de-escalation tool, and the last tool that we're going to use in an escalated situation is the canines. We certainly don't want to have anybody bitten by them, so we try to avoid that as much as we can. And yet, we've yet to have a bite, thankfully. But we're prepared for that because we're certain that if that ever comes to that point, it's going to be because there was, a significant incident or crime that occurred where somebody was significantly assaulted or it was in the process of being assaulted, and all of our other resources were exhausted. So we're confident that that's going to be, and then we train for that. So those are some big hurdles we had to get across. I think I may have mentioned this before, but one of the big hurdle we had was learning that these canines are very well trained and smart dogs, but they've been in a kennel or a kennel atmosphere most of their lives. They haven't been in homes, so they're not necessarily potty trained. So working through that process, thankfully they are smart and responsive dogs, so they were quick to be trained, but that was a quick learning process for us. And there's been things that we've done and come across there. For example, our policies, we've had to change and implement some different things in our policies as we've gone, because and I think I've mentioned this before. It isn't a best practice. It's a great practice, but we are striving for greatness with them and eventually hope to make it a best practice because we are seeing the results. But there is and are hurdles to get through when implementing a team. But the buy-in from your administration is significant. And like I said, it's been very results. It's proven to have some great results. So it just increases their buy-in from there.
And did you happen to have any challenges at all from an infection control standpoint?
Oh, yes. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, infection prevention was one of the areas that we coordinated with prior to implementing the program, because, we wanted to make sure that in the healthcare setting, there are a lot of areas that can be, where there can be highly contagious patients and patients that can't be exposed to different things, and we want to make sure cleanliness of the facility is up to snuff. So we worked hand in hand with them and to make sure that or where we could go and couldn't go. And that is included in our policies and procedures. So there's, like our ORs and places like that where they certainly can't go and wouldn't go in most cases. So we did work hand in hand with them. We got to make sure the cleanliness of the dogs. We got to make sure that, we're keeping areas tidy, cleaning up after ourselves, and then making sure that providing folks with even hand sanitizer after petting the dog for a little while and loving the dog. We take many steps to make sure that infection prevention is controlled and keep those folks happy as well.
All right, and then internally, was there any type of communication campaign that just to kind of introduce people to the idea of the canines being a part of the security team in the hospital?
We did. We coordinated, and that was another hurdle. Thank you again for mentioning that. We hadn't used or utilized canines before, and introducing that to not just our security team, but our caregivers and staff, of if there was an incident where the canine was involved, and from even searches to de-escalating a patient or visitor, how are they going to act and react in those situations, what they can and can't do or should and shouldn't do. It was it's a learning process for everybody, but we wanted to make sure that everybody is aware that if the canine is involved, that our canine handlers, basically our scene commanders, and are ensuring that, folks are doing the right things to prevent injury to them or to what, the subject that we're dealing with at the time. It's been a fairly easy process, though. Once they get a hold of it, and they've seen it done a couple times, they're our caregivers have been, very much on board with the process and are very receptive to that. We did have almost like a PR campaign to let everybody know, and including the community. We go back to the communication to let them know that we do have the canines there and something to look for. So it's worked out very well.
Okay, great. Now, you had also mentioned with your canines that you've seen a noticeable difference in just in the reduction with workplace violence and just their ability to de-escalate individuals. Were there any other benefits that you didn't actually expect that happened as a result of adding them to your program?
Yes, communication interdepartmentally with not just the security team, but other departments within healthcare, not just within healthcare, but outside of healthcare. Through healthcare, we've done some training with our state and local agencies and law enforcement, built relationships there through that training. There's other entities and areas, community, that have shown interest in the canines. So we've done some canine demonstrations and kind of shown what they're used for and how they're utilized and the good that they're doing. So we've used it as an excellent PR tool for us. Our comms team has been on board, very much on board and communicating that out to the local community. When people see them going through the halls, they want to stop and say hi and pet the dogs. And, they ask the handler, of course, and 8 times out of 10, the handler is going to be on board with that and let them pet and converse. And it's a great relationship building tool. Our caregivers, they take their breaks to come visit the dogs. It's an out for them. So, a way to get away from their everyday things and come pet and love on the dogs, and the dogs absolutely love it too. So it's a win-win. But outside of de-escalation and reducing workplace violence, they've been a great communication tool. They really put our security team out there, and people aren't, so afraid of them. There's often, I will say, sometimes there's a stigma that comes with security, and we certainly don't want that. We want to be open and approachable, and the dogs help a great deal with that.
Sorry, now, Nelson, you had mentioned that you were introduced to the idea of canines through IAHSS. Were you a member prior to that, or did you become a member to just kind of learn more about this program?
No, I had been a member. I joined IAHSS shortly after getting into healthcare. I was looking for any help that I could get to transition from law enforcement into healthcare, and IAHSS was one of the biggest organizations, and I've actually found it to be certainly the most helpful. But I was attending a conference for IAHSS when I learned about, somebody had mentioned canines. It wasn't a topic of discussion or anything. I think they talked about tasers or something in healthcare, and canines was also mentioned in there. And I kind of took it from there and started doing some research from that. But the IAHSS, like I said, has been tremendously helpful in my transition, because I was certainly new to healthcare, and if people aren't aware of it, healthcare is extraordinarily different than other areas, and it brings its own set of rules and regulations and Joint Commission, and there's different regulating agencies that kind of oversee healthcare. So along with a tremendous amount of workplace violence that it comes with. So these were all new things to me. So IAHSS was a great resource and tool that I used to transition. And like I said, that's where I heard about canines there. It was mentioned, and went from there.
You had mentioned earlier that as having these canines as part of your program, you've seen a decrease in violent incidents, or you've had examples of where they've actually been able to de-escalate a situation. Would you mind sharing a couple examples of this being the case? Sure.
There's a number of incidents that, there's incidents that I couldn't even tell you about, but just because of the presence of the canine, incidents are de-escalated. But there's a couple that come to mind. One, for example, we had a patient come into our psych emergency room, and she was very escalated as she came in. Caregivers were trying to provide her medications, and somehow she got a hold of some needles and was waving them around, threatening the caregivers. And then, so the canine team came in, and immediately the whole, I picture a very escalated scene where you have an agitated patient just swinging carelessly, recklessly, swinging needles and things around. It could be a hairy and scary situation. But the introduction of the canine, they see the canine, and she immediately changed her whole demeanor. She was like, "Oh, I like your dog. Can I pet him?" So the handler agreed. He said, "Yes, you can pet them, but first you need to put down the needles, and then we can go from there." And she followed that. She put down the needles, but stepped away from them. The handler, held true to their word and allowed her to pet the dog, and she de-escalated significantly. I mean, in that case, nobody was injured. The patient got what they wanted. The caregivers were safe. And again, our ultimate goal is to prevent injuries to anybody, and that was the case here. Another incident in the emergency room where a patient comes in, a sick young girl, and we had an extended waiting time in our emergency room at the time, as a lot of emergency rooms do. The father became very escalated and started slamming and cursing and being aggressive towards our caregivers in the triage area. And in comes the canine. He kept that up for a little while, and then the handler gave the dog the command to bark. And sure enough, he did, and it got the guy's attention, and he pretty much stopped everything he was doing. He was like, okay. backed off. Again, in this case, nobody was injured. The situation was de-escalated. Our patient was seen, and it was a win-win for everybody. Nobody gets hurt. That's our goal. There's a number of situations like that, and again, I couldn't tell you how many don't actually occur because the presence of the canine and people act differently. If you or I told that individual to stop, that may even increase or escalate them further. But with the presence of the canine, they're just more apt to listen and respond to that than they might be to you and me.
It seems like, well, not it seems like, there's definitely a lot that's involved with adding canines to a security program. So I have a two-part question for you, basically about the training. So what does training look like for both the canines and for their handlers? And what are some of the characteristics that you would look for in a handler versus one of your regular patrol officers?
Okay. So training-wise, on average, a typical handler school, per se, is about 6 weeks. But training is constant. Training will occur with these canines and the handlers until, either one of them leaves. As long as they're handling a canine or they're working together as a team, training is ongoing. Just like any nurse or caregiver with ongoing credits and things to keep licenses and such, we want to keep training ongoing with our canine teams. And I like to think that the dogs are perfect, but it's the handlers typically that need more training. So we do train weekly in addition to the 6 weeks. We train weekly with a local trainer that we contract, and does a great job coming in and working on different aspects of, with the dog, depending on, if there's certain things the dog may need to work on, whether it's, the detection portion or the obedience. The obedience is continually ongoing as well with the handlers themselves, even at their homes where the dogs stay. They're always working and playing with the dogs and making sure that the obedience is, up to par, and that because there are those risks and liabilities, we want to make sure that these dogs are at the top of their game. So training never stops. And to go with what we're looking for in a selection process for a handler, it's huge. It's a huge part of it. Because our handlers are taking these dogs, in our case, they're taking them to their homes, off duty, where these dogs are still part of our healthcare system, and they're still an asset for the healthcare system. So if anything happens off duty, we want to make sure that we want to make sure that nothing happens off duty. So handler responsibility, making sure that those handlers are able to make good choices, keep a level head, when there's emergency situations and they are taking command of that scene, that they're able to keep that level head to prevent injuries and keep bad things from occurring. We want to make sure, again, not just the dogs and canines are on top of their game, but the handlers are as well. We want to also make sure that these canines are, again, assets for our healthcare system. We want to make sure that they're well taken care of. They have plenty of exercise. They eat. They probably eat better than some of our home pets. Their veterinary checkups are routine, and making sure that these dogs are the healthiest that they can be and in the best shape they can be, because we may need to utilize them, and in some cases they can save lives. So we want to make sure that these dogs are well fed, well taken care of, and well trained. And again, not just the dogs, but also the handlers. We want to make sure that they stay above and beyond where our typical officers may be. I mean, we want to make sure our officers are well trained, but our canine handlers, we have high expectations of them, and we got to make sure that they're the stars.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a high level of commitment on the part of those handlers. It's just not only a full-time job, but a full-time job outside of their full-time job. It's pretty commendable and pretty outstanding that you can find people who are suitable for those roles that that are able to perform on a daily basis like that.
It is, and if you've ever worked or talked with a handler, I think any number of them will tell you, excuse me, that it's very rewarding as well. There is a lot that goes into it, and again, we do have high expectations of the handlers because there is such responsibility. But there's a great reward. I mean, they're getting a great partner that they can take home, and when we're selecting our handlers, one of the questions we ask is, is your family on board with this? Because it is a commitment, and not just for the handlers, but for that handler's family. I mean, you got to, have a yard, and some of them have children, and we want to make sure that they're all going to be safe and not put into harm's way, because, the dogs can be dangerous at some point. If these dogs are ill-trained or not trained well in obedience and different things, people can get hurt, and we want to avoid all that. So it is a big responsibility, and it is an ongoing and forever responsibility. As long as, like I said, as long as they have these canines in their care, it's an ongoing process. It's a never-ending process.
You talk a lot about IAHSS, and I can personally attest to the fact that you're someone who's jumped in with both feet. I know you've been in the hospital for 5 years. In that time, you've managed to earn your CHPA. But you've also presented at one of our conferences, and you've also done a webinar as well. And I know there's a lot of talk about your 2020 program, your 2020 vision, where you want to have all of your officers trained through IAHSS and earn that program distinction.
Yes, sir.
As far as some of the benefits, you did touch on some of them earlier, but what are some of the other benefits of IAHSS? And for anybody who may be thinking about a membership or is just unfamiliar with the association, what advice would you offer them?
I would say that if you're looking for resources, if you're in healthcare, safety, and security, and you're looking for resources, I would absolutely say there is no better place to find those than through IAHSS. IAHSS is full of members and participants around the world, really, that have been there. So if you're experiencing some difficulties or have some challenges you're facing due to whatever issue it might be, I guarantee you that you're not the only person that's faced that challenge. And often IAHSS will have a solution or can offer some things to make that easier for you. I think part of my job and our mission is to ease the way, and that's what I find through IAHSS. There's a number of challenges that we faced, and let's go through IAHSS and see what they have to offer through policies, procedures. We're not reinventing the wheel, and that's what we want to make sure that we don't have to go through that again. It's already been there. Somebody's already done it. Somebody's probably already written about it, or there's policy for it, or best practice for that. IAHSS, like I said, is by far your best resource for those kind of things. Again, encouraging my team. That's our vision for 2020 is to have everybody certified through IAHSS, because if you've been here 20 years, if you've been here a year or a month, there's some great resources, and I can tell you I've learned so much going through there and networking through the people that are already associated with it. It's a huge challenge, problem solver, and the networking and resources available to you I just can't speak highly enough about it.
Now, what would you, if there's somebody listening right now, a program leader who wants to implement the addition of canines to their team, what advice would you offer them?
Well, I would advise them to do their homework. We've had actually people come visit us, and even from within our system and outside our system, they'd come visit us to see if it was something that they could utilize. And some have found that, they didn't have the wherewithal, the setup to get the program going. They didn't have a strong security structure. There's other things missing. I encourage everybody to look into it to see if that's something that you'd be willing to do. There's risk to it, but I can guarantee you the risk, the reward is greater than the risk, and we've seen that with our numbers in decrease in workplace violence. They've been significant, so much so that we're looking to expand our program and add additional dogs, so we have around-the-clock coverage, which is excellent. Our caregivers are super excited by that. I encourage everybody to reach out to me. There's other places, there's other folks, around and through IAHSS even that may have contacts for canine handlers. People can certainly reach out to me, and I'm happy to share any of my information because it is a learning process. Again, I know coming into healthcare, everybody seems to be looking for best practice. I don't know that this is a best practice yet. It is a great practice, and we're looking to make it a best practice. But if there's something that we've done already that we can keep them from having to go through, I'm happy to learn from my mistakes.
All right, and then I guess the last thing I have for you, Nelson, you'd touched on this earlier, but you said you're more than happy to answer any questions people may have. You encourage people to reach out to you. I know you're on LinkedIn.
Yes.
How do you prefer people connect with you?
Email is typically the best way. I can be reached at nelson.price@providence.org. That's my work email, and I'm happy to answer questions or have conversations if you're looking at starting a canine program, or even if there's other things you want to touch base with, reference healthcare. In my transition from law enforcement, I have learned a tremendous amount through IAHSS and just through our everyday dealings. I'm happy to answer questions, and my philosophy through all this is we're all on the same team, and we have many of the same goals. To keep people safe, caregivers, visitors, patients. We want to keep everybody safe, and make hospitals and healthcare a safe and easy place to go. So yes, by all means, nelson.price@providence.org. And if I don't reach out to you, I'll get back to you immediately. I'll do it within a short amount of time.
Great stuff, Nelson. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. And I'm sure the whole Healthcare Security Cast community appreciates it as well.
Thank you, Brian. I greatly appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for another installment of the Healthcare Security Cast. Be sure to engage with us on social media, on our LinkedIn group, and on our Facebook page. And use that hashtag HSCCommunity. Thank you very much for supporting the podcast. Join us next week when we have a new guest and a new topic. And until next time, take care.